The Old West, an untamed land that lured countless pioneers in the 19th century with promises of freedom, boundless opportunity, and a fresh start. But was it truly the dream they hoped for? Beneath the romantic tales of endless horizons and fearless adventurers lies a far grittier reality. The journey west in a covered wagon was no fairy tale. It was a brutal test of endurance, filled with unforgiving terrain, constant danger, and unimaginable hardship. Scorching days, sleepless nights, and relentless challenges pushed even the strongest to their breaking point. Think you know what life on the trail was like? Here are 7 harsh truths that might make you rethink your pioneer fantasies. The final one will leave you completely stunned. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment in the comment section below. Months of hardship. Covered wagons were anything but swift. On average, they moved at a sluggish pace of 8 to 20 miles each day, depending on circumstances. Smooth terrain and favorable weather could allow for up to 20 miles daily, enabling travelers to make steady progress. However, rugged landscapes, perilous mountain crossings, or adverse weather frequently reduced this pace to a crawl. Take St. Louis, Missouri, a common starting point for westward expeditions, as an example. This frontier hub was approximately 1,750 miles from San Francisco if measured in a straight line. But the actual trails were anything but direct, winding through difficult terrain and significantly increasing the distance. Even under perfect conditions, maintaining a consistent pace of 20 miles per day would mean the journey took around 90 days. Unfortunately, such ideal scenarios were rare and hardly reflected reality. The wagons rarely reached their maximum pace daily, as obstacles such as illness, injuries, mechanical breakdowns, and adverse weather frequently brought progress to a halt. In reality, the journey from St. Louis to the West Coast often stretched to about 6 months. This arduous expedition tested the physical and mental resilience of all involved. Accidents, disease outbreaks, and sheer exhaustion were common, with many pioneers tragically failing to complete the trek. For those who endured, reaching the West Coast was a testament to their fortitude. However, the months sacrificed to this grueling journey were a heavy cost for the dream of a new life. Select your wagon with caution. When preparing for the westward migration, pioneers typically selected one of 2 wagon types. The first and most iconic was the prairie schooner, famously depicted in cultural references like the Oregon Trail game. These wagons were designed with large wooden hoops running along their length, covered by canvas to form a protective canopy. The canvas shielded travelers from the harsh sun and served as a secure space for storing their belongings. In many respects, the prairie schooner was the 19th century equivalent of a family minivan, built to transport households and their possessions across great distances. From afar, the curved canvas tops resembled the sails of schooner ships, which inspired the wagon's nautical nickname. Prairie schooners were specifically crafted for long-distance travel, allowing families to cross the Great Plains and, with luck, reach the West Coast. However, the journey was far from comfortable. The wagons rattled and bounced over rough terrain, pushing the patience and endurance of everyone aboard to their limits. The second option was the Conestoga wagon, a larger and heavier vehicle. Pulled by teams of up to 6 horses, these wagons were not well suited for cross-country travel due to their bulk and weight. Instead, they were more commonly used for shorter trips, such as moving goods or people from cities like St. Louis to territories in Kansas or Oklahoma. Settlers often relied on them for transporting supplies rather than enduring the punishing westward migration. Regardless of the type chosen, wagons presented significant difficulties. With no proper roads and trails that were rough and unpredictable, travel was arduous. Severe weather only added to the challenge, frequently turning dirt paths into treacherous mud traps. Wagon wheels frequently broke. Livestock, like oxen and horses, often succumbed to exhaustion or injuries, and wagon trains were regularly bogged down, stuck in mud, or damaged during challenging parts of the journey. For pioneers, wagons were essential tools for survival, but they also symbolized the relentless hardships of life on the trail, sleeping under the stars in the Old West. It's easy to imagine that pioneer families would sleep inside their wagons after a long day of travel. With a canvas cover overhead, wagons might seem like a natural choice for shelter. However, the reality was far less accommodating. Covered wagons, such as the prairie schooner, were designed for hauling goods rather than providing sleeping space. Measuring only about 4 feet wide and 9 to 10 feet long, these wagons had very limited room. This tight space was further crammed with the family's possessions, everything they could carry for their new life out west. With supplies occupying every inch of the wagon, there was no space left for sleeping inside. Instead, families had to rest outdoors under the open sky. Most nights, they spread blankets on the ground or set up makeshift shelters using tent poles and canvas. While these options provided some protection, they left families exposed to the elements, whether it was scorching heat, freezing cold, or torrential rain. In wet weather, the ground often became muddy, making sleep even more uncomfortable and soaking bedding and clothing. During severe storms, families would sometimes huddle together beneath their wagons for refuge from the harsh conditions. Sleeping outdoors on the trail left pioneers vulnerable to harsh weather conditions such as wind, lightning, and flooding. In some cases, the hard ground beneath their wagons became their only option for rest, providing neither warmth nor comfort. Unsurprisingly, this led to sore backs and chronic exhaustion among travelers. Beyond discomfort, sleeping outside posed significant dangers from both the environment and wildlife. Prairie nights brought threats like biting insects, venomous snakes, and even larger predators, adding an element of danger to what should have been a time for recovery. The lack of secure shelter often required families to remain alert, with members taking turns keeping watch through the night to protect their group. Despite these hardships, pioneers adapted to their circumstances. They developed strategies to reduce discomfort, such as setting up campsites near natural windbreaks or water sources. However, sleeping arrangements remained one of the many challenges of life on the trail, a constant reminder of the sacrifices made in pursuit of a new beginning in the Wild West. Settlers did not adopt a horse culture. When imagining life on the Great Plains, images of horse culture often come to mind, particularly among Native American tribes who mastered horseback riding after horses were introduced by Europeans in the 16th century. Horses revolutionized their way of life, enhancing hunting, mobility, and warfare efficiency. Similarly, American soldiers, explorers, and traders relied heavily on horses for transportation and combat across the vast prairies. However, settlers were largely excluded from this equestrian lifestyle. Unlike native tribes or military groups that relied on horses for survival and efficiency, settlers primarily used oxen or mules to pull their wagons. Horses were less practical for them due to their higher maintenance needs and unsuitability for pulling heavy loads over long distances. For families heading west, owning horses was often an unattainable luxury. Horses were expensive to buy and required considerable upkeep, including proper feed, care, and shelter. For most settlers, these costs were simply out of reach, especially when their limited resources were already stretched thin. Preparing for the journey west was a monumental task, with most of their money going toward essentials like wagons, supplies, and provisions. Saving up for a horse was an expense that many families simply couldn't justify. Instead, settlers turned to more practical and affordable animals, mules and oxen. These hardy creatures were far better suited to the grueling demands of the westward journey. Unlike horses, mules, and oxen could survive on rough forage found along the trail, making them easier and cheaper to maintain. They also proved sturdier and more durable than horses, capable of pulling heavily loaded wagons across endless grasslands and through treacherous mountain passes. Mules were particularly valued for their strength and sure-footedness, which made them ideal for navigating rocky or uneven terrain. Oxen, while slower than mules or horses, were incredibly strong and reliable, making them perfect for hauling heavy loads over long distances. These animals became indispensable for settlers, helping families carry their belongings through the relentless challenges of the trail and ensuring they had a chance to reach their destination. While they lacked the speed of horses, their endurance and practicality made them indispensable. Upon reaching their destination, settlers often repurposed their mules and oxen for agricultural work. These animals became crucial for plowing fields, hauling timber, and building new settlements. Horses, though highly valued by wealthier settlers and ranchers, were rarely part of the equation for the average pioneer family. In many ways, the reliance on mules and oxen instead of horses highlights the ingenuity and practicality of westward pioneers. They made the best use of what they could afford, focusing on utility over status in their quest for a new life on the frontier. While the popular image of settlers galloping across the plains on horseback remains iconic, the reality was far more grounded, both literally and figuratively. Wild West slow fast food. Feeding themselves along the journey presented an entirely different challenge for pioneer families traveling west in prairie schooners or Conestoga wagons. These wagons were primarily intended to transport household belongings, tools, and essential supplies rather than serve as mobile kitchens or food storage units. Provisions had to be carefully chosen and rationed to last throughout the months-long journey. Staples such as flour, dried meat, beans, rice, coffee, and dried fruit were common due to their long shelf life and portability. However, as supplies dwindled over time, meals became increasingly sparse and repetitive. Pioneers often relied on hunting game like deer or buffalo when available, or foraging for wild plants and berries along the trail. Despite their resourcefulness in preparing meals with limited ingredients, food remained one of the most pressing concerns during the grueling westward migration. Items in the wagons were packed tightly, often wrapped and stacked to maximize space, making them difficult to access during the journey. This meant settlers couldn't simply open their wagon and retrieve a ready-to-eat meal. To meet their daily food needs, pioneers depended on a specialized companion vehicle, the chuck wagon. The chuck wagon became an indispensable part of wagon trains, particularly for larger groups or families traveling together. Similar in size to a prairie schooner, the chuck wagon was specifically designed for food preparation and storage. One of its key features was a water barrel mounted on the outside, providing easy access to fresh water throughout the day. Many chuck wagons also came equipped with a coffee grinder, enabling pioneers to brew much-needed coffee to combat exhaustion after long, arduous hours on the trail. Another notable feature was the possum belly, a storage compartment slung beneath the wagon. This space was used to carry cow chips, dried cattle dung, and firewood, essential materials for building cooking fires at night. Cow chips, though unconventional by modern standards, were a practical fuel source for settlers crossing treeless plains where traditional firewood was scarce. When the wagon train stopped for the night, the chuck wagon became the heart of camp life. Settlers gathered around it to prepare meals, exchange stories, and relax after the day's exhausting journey. This communal atmosphere offered a rare moment of respite and camaraderie amid the relentless challenges of westward travel. The wagon's design made it highly efficient for cooking. It featured drawers, shelves, and compartments that stored utensils, dried foods, and spices, essentially creating a mobile kitchen. Meals typically consisted of simple dishes like beans, salted pork, or biscuits, all cooked over open flames. Despite their simplicity, these meals and the chuck wagon itself brought a sense of comfort and community that was vital for morale during the grueling journey. Beyond its practical function, the chuck wagon symbolized the ingenuity and adaptability of pioneers. It showcased how settlers confronted the harsh realities of trail life by turning limited resources into creative, functional solutions. In many respects, the chuck wagon was more than just a survival tool. It was a lifeline that ensured settlers could sustain themselves during their months-long treks across unforgiving terrains. Rainstorms, snowfalls. Harsh weather was one of the constant challenges faced by settlers traveling westward. The prairie schooners they depended on were covered with canvas tops meant to protect their cargo, but these coverings offered only limited protection from the elements. Rainstorms, snowfalls, and relentless prairie winds tested the wagon's durability and often required families to make extensive preparations before embarking on their journeys. The canvas tops were typically made from 10-ounce cotton duck fabric and started as untreated material that provided minimal weather resistance. To improve their durability against rain and light snow, settlers treated the fabric with a coating of linseed oil. This process created a waterproof barrier, transforming the canvas into a more effective shield against harsh weather conditions. However, even with these measures in place, wagons were far from impervious to the elements, leaving families vulnerable to nature's unpredictability. Once waterproofed, the canvas was carefully stretched over the wooden frame of the wagon and firmly secured to keep the family's belongings dry. However, this protection was far from perfect. Rain on the open plains rarely fell vertically and was often driven sideways by strong winds. During intense storms, water often managed to seep beneath the canvas, drenching anything that wasn't well protected. When rain wasn't an issue, windstorms swept across the plains, carrying dust and sand that battered wagons and crept into every crack. Settlers had to constantly deal with these challenges, frequently stopping to adjust or repair their wagon covers. To enhance their defenses against the weather, pioneers came up with additional solutions to reinforce their coverings. A popular technique was to thread a drawstring through the edges of the canvas, allowing them to pull it tight and create a secure, enclosed space. This design worked much like a basic version of a modern hoodie, with the drawstring offering an adjustable barrier to keep out rain, wind, and dirt. Still, even with these precautions in place, settlers had to stay alert. Severe storms could easily overpower their efforts, leaving their supplies soaked and food ruined. Blowing sand presented another set of difficulties for travelers. It could wear down fabrics and lodge itself in wagon axles, leading to maintenance problems that required immediate attention. For many pioneers, the ever-changing weather served as a constant reminder of how wild and unpredictable the frontier could be. It emphasized the unrelenting obstacles they had to overcome in their pursuit of a better life and highlighted the determination needed to survive such a harsh journey. Pack tools. Carefully traveling west in a covered wagon was a test of resilience, and one of the most challenging aspects was maintaining the wagons themselves. With no proper roads, settlers navigated rough dirt trails, riddled with rocks, holes, and other obstacles. Breakdowns were frequent, and there were no roadside services or mechanics to assist. Pioneers were entirely responsible for diagnosing and fixing their wagons, often in remote and unforgiving conditions. Preparation was critical, so families packed essential tools, spare parts, and raw materials. Axes, hammers, saws, nails, extra wood, and metal were common supplies for crafting makeshift repairs. Even with these tools, settlers often had to rely on ingenuity. For instance, if a wooden wheel splintered on rocky terrain or an axle snapped under the weight of a heavy load, pioneers had to improvise using nearby resources like fallen branches or scavenged materials. Such breakdowns weren't rare inconveniences, they were an expected part of the journey. Wagon wheels, typically made from durable woods like oak or hickory, often cracked under the relentless strain of rough trails and fluctuating weather conditions. Metal components such as axles and fittings could bend or break due to constant vibrations and impacts. While these issues might seem minor today, they posed serious threats to the journey's success by delaying progress and endangering lives. To address these challenges, wagons were equipped with repair kits stored in compartments like jockey boxes attached to their sides. These kits included iron bolts, linchpins, nails, and other essentials. Settlers also carried tar buckets for lubricating axles, sometimes using bacon grease in emergencies, and jacks for lifting heavy wagons during repairs. When a major issue arose, such as a broken axle or wheel, families often had to unload their wagon completely and flip it onto its side to make repairs, a grueling task that required strength and patience. For pioneers traveling through harsh landscapes with no backup options, wagon maintenance was not just a skill, but a lifeline that determined whether they reached their destination safely. These 7 facts reveal just how arduous it truly was for those courageous enough to undertake such a dangerous expedition. The Transcontinental Railroad later built upon their efforts, connecting distant parts of the country and revolutionizing transportation and commerce. It allowed goods and people to move across vast distances with unprecedented speed and efficiency, fostering economic growth and national unity. However, this progress also came at a cost for Native American populations who faced displacement and cultural upheaval as settlers expanded westward. The sacrifices of these early settlers remain a powerful testament to their resilience and courage. Their struggles laid the groundwork for a nation that would later be united by steel rails, but built on their spirit of perseverance. If you enjoyed these stories of hardship and survival, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more captivating insights into the raw realities of life in the Old West. You won't want to miss what's coming next.